Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Change 2023 series and a part of our All Things Change podcast webinar, part of our BGSU Doctorate in Organizational Development and Change Symposia series, and a whole host of other things that are part of our community in organizational development and change and all people who care about change in our world. We are having a series. So this is the second in the series. We had one last week and we have the second one this week. And for each of the next weeks, we'll also have one. And you can see them in our recordings. We'll have a whole place for you to see all of the presentations during the conference, the in-person portion that occurred previously, and now we're moving into the online portion. So we have it all aggregated into one spot, which will be served up to everybody who's here. You'll be getting an email or some communication, and you can always find it on our website, nexusforchange.com or org, Nexus, the number 4 and change. And that's a good place to go to kind of see a variety of things, including our All Things Change podcast and other stuff like that. So we were just talking, and this kind of actually really gets at the notion of the author jam and thought leadership. But we have a group of people that are contributing to the Collaborative Change Library, the Collaborative Change Handbook, and a community of people that work in collaborative processes and various aspects of change in our world and care about the human side of change, if you will. And we come together regularly to support each other around our thought leadership. So what we were just talking about coming in is an example of how we are. We come together, we bring together our thoughts, things that we're working on, questions that we have, something we need help on. And so Dave comes into the session and says, "Hey, Steve, I can't get my mind off of this tsunami change concept because I just sent out a survey asking people, please weigh in and give me some feedback on tsunami change, this concept I'm working on with Don Warwick." And so we started just debating and talking about, then Ryan pops in and Ryan's going, yeah. And then he pulls up this book, Waves of Change. I believe that's from Harrison Owen, right? Is that Harrison's book, right? And Harrison's book on Waves of Change. And then Dave was talking of permanent whitewater, which is his buddy's, Peter Vale's word that he coined way back when. And this is not the same as that. And so we're just having this debate. This is the laboratory for thought leadership. And what is thought leadership? And Teo, if you could put into the link to the survey, because you have it somewhere, if you could put the link in, or somebody could, for those that want to fill out the survey.
I'll find it in a second.
On tsunami change. But what is thought leadership? And there are some, and Waves of Culture by Fons Trompenaars too, right? So there's different. So there's Ryan. There's also another book that Fons has that's on cross-cultural. I have the book somewhere here. It's another one on waves that he talks about.
Yeah, Dale put it right there in the chat.
Yeah. So there's multiple people. So this metaphor of waves, this metaphor of nature, this metaphor of surfing, that kind of stuff. It's there, and we use metaphors a lot of times to help us grasp hard to grasp concepts, to help us better grasp. And there's a whole science on the use of metaphors and articles on how metaphors are used. It gets into the science of semantics, it gets into the science of learning, and those kinds of things. Now, coming full circle, what is thought leadership? And I'm curious what you all think. So I'm looking at David, and I'm looking at Carol and Melissa and T.O. and others that are here. And I know Angie, I know a few of you. I don't know some of you. And I'm thinking, what is thought leadership? So I'll throw out, and I would ask for a little open discussion, maybe context setting discussion around what is thought leadership. We're then going to break into small groups and tell our stories of our journey to thought leadership and why it matters and what questions percolate up when we think about thought leadership. And then we're going to bring it back together to have an open discussion about our journeys. What are some themes in our journey to thought leadership? What are our questions around thought leadership? What are the best practices and ways and the whys of thought leadership? And we'll come back and talk about that. But to begin, let's start with what is thought leadership and context setting. So anybody here can weigh in. I'm going to start. I'll throw out my definition. I'd be curious what your definition, and you can put it in the chat, or you can just unmute and come in and share it here. For me, it's simple. It's the written word. we had our speaker, lunchtime keynote during the conference, Bill O'Brien, talk about Eastern, Western approaches, East meets West approach to mindfulness. He talked about when language was developed, and he talked about how there were many different hominoids, if you will, different variations of humans, Neanderthal and Homo sapien, this kind of around the planet. And within a course of 5,000 years, the 6 or 7 of those disappeared. Now, for those of you that are religious, I am too, and it doesn't contradict, for me personally, my understanding. I often say science helps us understand what creation and the creator put in motion. So it helps to understand it. That's my belief around that. But I wanted to acknowledge that because I want to be open and inclusive for everybody who has different perspectives, and just putting out there that this is mine. So, but what he shared spoke to me with this notion that there are these 6 different variations of human beings on the planet. And then over the course of about 5,000 years, they all vanished except for one, Homo sapien. And what he said was what they've been able to discern so forth through science and so forth is that language was developed. And the minute language was developed, it created more ability for imagination and creation and those kinds of things, and the ability for the human beings in total to be able to work together to better survive danger. He also said some other things that you all should go listen to. It was mind-blowing, to be quite honest with you. It was mind-opening, I should say, mind-expanding, what some of the concepts that he shared. Very helpful. So now I come full circle, when the written word was created. And then you go into the written word, then go to the moment where the printing press was created. And you think about how revolutionary and transformative it was for our planet. And we were excelling and growing and advancing civilization and society, and we were growing, and all of a sudden the printing press came, and bam, things expanded even exponentially faster after that moment, which I would call maybe a tsunami change, moment. And the written word is central to thought leadership. The written word, it begins your journey to thought leadership by writing down what you know. And it's about writing something down that can be shared with others in both written, presentation, and mixed media forms, fast forwarding to today. And so at the core is a written word that lends itself to presentations, mixed media, and other forms of content distribution, all that can be what I would call scalable knowledge, where it's shared and then it's shared and shared and shared and passed on more easily from one person to the next. That's my definition of thought leader, is the minute you create scalable knowledge that can be shared from you to another person and then from other people to other people. The minute you create scalable knowledge is the minute you have stepped into thought leadership. Now, there are snake oil salespeople and there are evidence-based salespeople, right? Because people put out book of the month, hot word, buzzword of the month concept, not evidence-based, making claims that this will save your leadership or change your organization or improve lives or whatever. There's a lot of it going out right now. If you're out on social media, around a bunch of people putting stuff out about how to lose weight and how to get healthy and all this stuff about how to lose weight in 5 minutes and not exercise and just visualize, and all of a sudden you lose weight or something. I don't know. But there's people that are making these claims, and they are thought leaders because they're influencing thought. But I would say that there's an ethical aspect to thought leadership that we have to recognize, and that there are those that are more evidence-based, using the 3 types of logic, which is there's basically 3 types of evidence. I will say there's logical evidence, anecdotal evidence, logical, anecdotal, and empirical. Okay. So when people put a claim out there, it can logically make sense and be snake oil. It can be this magic water. Because it's logical, they can make a logical claim and you go, "Ooh, I'll take it." Boom. Then they can add anecdotal to it. They can say, "Well, here's my idea and here's my story, and my story will be yours if you follow my story." It's anecdotal. Then there's empirical. Well, what science, what evidence, what do we have from science and research, action research or applied research or whatever, experimental, whatever, to support that? So you got these three times. So what I would offer is that thought leadership is creating scalable knowledge in written, presentation, mixed media forms that can impact others while you sleep. Okay. Passive income, make money while you sleep. Passive difference making is thought leadership. The question is, are you making a positive difference or are you making a negative difference? Is the things that you're creating, is it evidence-based in a way that is truly helpful? And that's a question, right? So I'll stop there. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on what is thought leadership to you? What would you change in what I shared? What would you add? What jumps out to you that you would agree with? What are your thoughts? Yeah, Dave.
Well, I think I'm always thinking about the thought reader, as I'm hopeful that people will buy Peter Vale and my book, and lots of well developed books. But I look at the thought readers in various categories. There are people who will skim a thought and buy it, drink it, and that's snake oil. So as an educator for the last 50 plus years, one of my responsibilities with students was to help them become more discerning thought readers and hungry thought readers and challenging thought readers. That's where our work, it comes up to that point, and whoever receives it, the caliber of their commitment to reading it, thinking it, and acting upon it is entirely up to them to a point, but how well educated they are in that moment has a great deal of difference in what they can do with a quick phrase or a blog or an article, if they get to read one, or a book or other things. So that's my contribution. I'm concerned about thought readers.
I think it's brilliant interpretation of thought leaders and thought readers, right? I think that's really a brilliant reflection. I hadn't thought about thought readers, which is kind of a neat way of thinking about it. Other thoughts out? What else do y'all think?
Okay, I'll jump in. I was waiting to see if anyone was there. I put something in the chat about thought leaders implies thought followers. And there's a book
that. I stole that from you. Right.
Well, I stole it from someone else too. There's a book by a guy named Connell Fanning, who wrote this book called The Leadership Mind. And it even goes farther that, well, how do you define leadership? First of all, so what are we talking about? What aspect of leadership, as depending on your definition, the ability of a community to define its state of the future, like something like Peter Senge says. So, okay. So if you are contributing thought to a community that is seeking to establish a future for itself, you're expressing leadership in that domain by whatever artifact you choose to do it. And again, the written word, when Gutenberg put the Bible out there and created the tsunami of the printing press, that's certainly one bit. But I would offer that thought leadership comes in, at least now, in differing forms as well, in the forms of what you're creating in video and audio and all forms of media. And again, Dave, yours in Peter's book in digital form, as a logical extension of Gutenberg and all these other things. So so my contribution to that is, in addition to followership, how do you define leadership, and what is the purpose of that thought being put into the container that you define?
Yeah. A quick jump on that. who are we in this conversation? We are thought havers. We have the thoughts, and that's, I guess, where it all begins. And the people I've been talking with in the podcast, including one I just finished with, oh God, Dylan Connor, who's been having powerful thoughts for over 50 years. And just, you can sense the energy behind someone gathering themselves up and saying, here's what I think, and this is what we can do with it. So that's the other side of who we are preparing in our graduate program in every kind of schooling, is people to be confident that the thoughts they're having, and they can check them out with literature searches and otherwise, but within them, they're different thoughts, leading thoughts, than all the other thoughts they're having. They're sort of like think, ooh, and then there's this push, and up comes what probably starts as an insight. And I suspect that all of us could look at any chapter we've written in the Collaborative Change Library and ask ourselves, when do we get that elevation of thought and energy that would make us want to sit down at a computer and start writing? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Like Neil Donald Walsh wrote Conversation with God a long time ago. And he talks about, two root emotions, Dave, that, it's either love or fear that would sponsor some thoughts that would ultimately lead to action. And so as we talk about thought leadership, I wonder if, and can we call ourselves a thought leader if it doesn't instigate action? Does it make it useless or more or less valuable? Is it subjective in terms of thought leadership? Is just one comment I thought. And then Ryan, when you talk about thought followership, was there a stigma that followership was bad? You were a lemming? Was he kind of saying it's necessary, not necessary? I'm just popcorning out a few there, divergent thoughts, as I'm apt to do.
Well, again, so I'll hold there. I want to respond to that, Dale, but I want to make sure that there's space for others to contribute their own conception of thought leadership.
I'd like to hear your response, Brijan, but my response is yes, being publicly instrumental is thought leadership, no question. But I think to Dale's question, there are many, many people that have crossed my path that I consider thought leaders and guides who work through influence to action. And I don't know how you categorize that. Maybe others write about them, but I think that's another element of thought leadership that's connected to the question that Dale just asked. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
So again, philosophically, what do we think about when we define leaders and followers? What's your valence on each of those terms, right? And I think that's a context that I try and shy away from the word leader, because there's a bit of a power over kind of thing. I am leading you, you are my follower, and that. So that's where it came from. And I also want to come back to Dale, if you wouldn't mind re-articulating the question after I kind of put that out there, is that, okay, so why am I putting my thought out there as a proposition, as a claim for someone else to consider it, discern whether it's legitimate, and act based on that, right? So that's why am I saying that I'm a thought? Maybe I'm not saying it, but that's why I'm doing it. And you said this idea of love and fear. So, okay, so I'm sitting here as someone who's listening to try and make change, and that. So what am I listening to? And what is the basis of responding to the invitation you're putting out there, right? So it's between love and fear is the invitation, like you're saying, and that's to choose between love and fear. And why am I choosing? Who am I looking at for guidance to make that choice? And I think I think we're talking about is the responsibility of those who make truth claims about, change. So Dale, is that kind of leading into a possible answer to your question, or how would you respond to that?
I love the shot you took at it. I wasn't trying to evaluate right or wrong. I would a lot of stuff there just for me to soak up. I love it, Ryan. As a musician, you know, leading is following is leading is following, you know, and is the drummer drumming for the dancer, or is the dancer dancing for the drummer? And the answer is yes.
We are all in ensemble, right?
Kind of like
We are,
it's kind of like the authentic way of sushi making.
What's that?
Say
Uh,
more.
So I was in Japan, and I happened to be invited in to speak after the tsunami hit, and they had a conference to talk about how they actually recovered from it and stories from that. And so it was a really interesting conference around change and reactions and so forth. And so, interestingly enough, I'm now later on looking at exploring tsunami change. But during that trip, my host took me and said, "I'm going to take you to a sushi restaurant." And I went to it, and I was the only person there. It just happened to be. It was not like planned that way. It wasn't planned. So I go in, and you sit down, and the person the sushi chef has been trained for years and years and years to look at you and just to say hi and to anticipate what you like. And they serve up a little bit, and they watch your reaction, and they try something else in your reaction, and they try something else, and they begin creating this by watching you. So you are in a way in that dance of, you know, I'm not ordering directly, but I'm sort of, and then there's this interplay, kind of like, it's a really interesting interplay between the two.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. So your hunger and your taste dictates what they deliver. So that puts some weight on our readership, if you will, out there.
And how many leaders are leading like that? You don't ask people, are you what's the right decision? You're not, and you're creating your content, right? I'm creating content for an audience, but how am I engaging the audience? Well, right now, like with my thing, I'm putting out the definition. I'm watching how people are reacting. Yeah. So is thought leadership, how do we dance? Like you said, Dale, how do I create content that appeals to my audience without talking to them?
Yeah, and that's been for people.
I don't think it's possible.
People who wrote long before us, they would work hard and it would be published in paper with a hardcover, and it may be 200, 300 copies, 1,000 copies, and they go out there, and some of them end up in libraries, some on people's bookshelves like us behind us. Right. And that is the frustration. They go through sometimes years to get those pages on the shelves and have very little way of getting a feedback loop, which one of the reasons I am very much attracted to the digital version of our book is that there are potential ways that we can get almost instant audience response, similarly to the way we do when we publish something on LinkedIn. And I think that way the person who has the next book in mind will have a more of a sushi understanding of how to write, how to organize, how to put in hooks in that book that are more likely to get to the point that Carol raised, which is influence to change. I think most of us write in our field to help people make change, want to make change, avoid change. And so, yeah, I think that closer, tighter feedback loop is something that the future is going to present as opportunities to the people you're graduating, for example, in the doctoral program. They're going to get much quicker feedback. And even the whole review process, the journal review process, has been sped up from what I've heard because they can use technology now.
Yeah, well, so I think that the thing is how does a person become a thought leader? So we were going to break up into groups, but we can just talk about it here in terms of stories to thought leadership. And granted, thought leadership doesn't require that you have a bestseller, and thought leadership doesn't require that you have and music A music leader doesn't have to be at Carnegie Hall. There are people that are creating music and sharing it locally and making a difference and a musical influence in their community. So similarly, I think when you look at thought leadership, I think it doesn't have to be changing the whole world or have to be recognized broadly. It's about a person's passion at the core. A person is something that they care about and that they want to share with others to help and be of service to the world. I often say that I think that thought leadership is the greatest it's the greatest demonstration of hope for our world. When someone creates something, they believe that it will impact others. Now you might say, well, what about a children's book? Or well, I think, maybe some for just entertainment. Even in entertainment alone, most books influence people, and there's a message sometimes woven into that. There's a passion in it. There's
Definitely.
a person, the author's passion. And so at the core, it's a passion. And when people write to make money, write because they want to be seen, because they want to be popular, I don't know, Dale, in music. How many people have you seen that want to just be popular musicians? They don't really love music per se. Then they like to play a little bit. How many of them are like really good and well received, and even locally, if they don't have some passion for it? What do you? I mean, is there something central to this notion of having a passion for what we choose to share?
I think any one of us can answer that. Who would disagree? It's hard to be good at anything you're not passionate about.
Yeah.
And you can be good, you can be very good without passion. How many people have the physical skills of an elite athlete, but don't reach elite because they don't have the passion for it? Think about, I'm thinking, sorry, I'm going on. I'm thinking
And
John
musician and
Bell.
music, like a lot
Yeah,
of people
yeah.
have. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I
So
mean, I was
go ahead.
going to say, so we bring practice into it, right? So what is your practice? Is your practice a basketball player? Like the difference between Allen Iverson and Kobe Bryant? This mindset of, practice, blah, is Iverson, but he's so talented and influential in that way. Kobe Bryant was massively talented, and he had a work ethic beyond any other.
That's right.
Yeah. And this is the idea too of, well, am I a pro or am I an amateur in my practice?
Right.
So an amateur, as coming from Emas, is a love for the practice, which is great. And who's it for? Is it for you? You do because you love it, or are you a professional and do you love it and want to give it to others and create an impact? So
yeah, right. And Ryan, there's two pieces that I think that are coming to that. One is you have to believe that the world will receive it. You have to believe in if you're a thought leader, you have to believe in your audience. You have to believe that the world is worthy or worth your time to share what you know with them. You have to there has to be some belief, hope for that. Second is you got to have some personal skills for getting things done. Like you just got to get up in the morning. Every thought leader will tell you, like you said, you got to practice, you got to work. You got to have just self-discipline, and not just amateur self-discipline. There's a practice and an art to being successful. And most people will tell you, set goals, work your plan, be persistent, pay attention to the details, have success habits. Every day you got to get up. Most thought leaders will say, almost to a T. They write regularly, and they have a schedule, and they have a pattern which they a discipline to their practice in writing. So I think that there's this notion of belief in the future, a self-discipline, success habits for doing it, built on passion, something that I care about, we care about, and then you got to take it forward from there.
There's a really interesting brief exchange in the chat where Theo is asking, are top industry performers and leaders the same as thought leaders, or is it just informed thought leadership? And Ryan responded, are they thought performers, ? So I think there's a
Yeah,
there's a
they are.
nuance there that I find interesting. Like what are consumers of thought leadership, and what do they do with your thought leadership? Are they inspired to then also become thought leaders, or are they saying, I don't know, Simon Sinek says, so here is my thought performance of somebody else's thought leadership? Or do I adapt it into my own practice and now make it my own thing that maybe is worth writing about, how somebody took what a Cynic, what a Fearon, what an Erickson, what a Cady, what a Drain, what a Manin said, and say, here's my version of this new nuance
Right.
that I'm taking out into the world.
So Teo, this prompted a quote for me. It's a Chinese proverb. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. If the garden is the place for creating words and thought leadership and writing, if the garden is that, and I'm just in the garden, it says to be a gardener in a war. If I'm just writing, but I don't have something to fight for, something I believe in, something I've experienced in. So I think this notion of be a warrior in a garden and a gardener in a war speaks to me in that moment, because we got to bring the thing we're passionate about and our willingness to get our hands dirty in that thing. Don't write about something abstract over there and then try to be an expert. You got to have the anecdotal evidence, logical evidence. So you got to anecdotal, I have an experience. Logic is I made sense of it. Empirical is I then tested it and tried it out. And I have to figure out what it means. So that's bringing those three pieces together as a warrior into the garden of thought leadership.
But I think of the tens of thousands of men and women who have a general responsibility for the success of their organization, and there's performance that says that they have succeeded so far. And I've always wanted to have more access with them as an academic, so that we could find out what they're learning in direct experience, because you can see the results of their decisions. And to me, the kinds of decisions they're making are kind of a thought leadership, but they're in a bushel, that they're only experienced within that little orbit. And yet some of us would love to have, and some of us have a lot of access as consultants to those action takers. And then we can wick off of their experience and observation and conversation some of the lessons they're learning, and then translate those into books and articles and other things. But as we're looking at change, that's what pulls us all together. The people who are doing their damnedest to keep a business afloat are learning something so valuable. And how do we get access to those gems?
Right. And so here's the thing. So we talk about, for lack of a better word, an ethical thought leader versus an unethical thought leader, right? So we talked about that. We talked about people doing it for the right reasons and making sure they're sharing something that can be helpful to others and being thoughtful about the evidence that they use, the three types of evidence and so forth. And then there's those that are just trying to sell something, make some cash, willing to put stuff out there that's not really well founded and grounded, right? So we talk about ethical, not ethical. We talked about the notion of meaningfulness or passion and our belief in society or humanity. And we offer, our thought leaders offer what they know because they have a belief. And if I come from the enlightened or the good side, there's the dark triad and the light triad in personality traits. Like narcissists are the dark side. And then on the light side, there is servant leadership. Okay. So but there's the dark triad and the light triad that's emerging in the literature, and it's personality traits. So on the dark side, again, is like narcissism and sociopaths, and on the light side is altruism and those kinds of things. So there's a look at this too. I think it's okay to say we have thought leaders that are on the dark and the light side, for example, right? And so you can have a passion to do dark work. You can have passion to do light work and to influence the world and to be a thought leader in the world in a dark or light way. Now, it's right. We all have judgments around that. Like it's value-based. Well, how do we determine it? You know it when you see it, those kinds of things. Now we come full circle, come back into this idea. that people who are thought leaders oftentimes have something to offer. How many people do you know says, I got a book I want to offer out there? I got that book. I can't tell you how many of my family members, I got a couple books out. They go, I want to talk to you because I got a book I want to do. I go, do you really know what it takes to create something, even to write an article, let alone a book? And I watch our students in the doctoral program who really work through all these issues like imposter syndrome and all these things that get in the way of people producing content. Yet they know something and they have something worthwhile to share with the world, but they stop short of creating it and sharing it. And it dies with them.
That's a shame.
It happens all the time, not
Yeah.
just some of the time, all the time. I would offer that everybody has a story to share that can help others. Yet some people will be in that unique category where they really love sharing and want to share it and want to get into advancing the knowledge and learning more about it. And so it's not for everybody. Some people like to do, and some people like to be, and it's okay. No shame. No shame. However, I would offer to you that it might be the second best alternative that people are living. I talk about passion and how people live their first best alternative life. I talk about my father in my talk I do around passion. My dad, who was amazing, wonderful dad. And when he died, before he died, I went to visit him and I sat there with him. And I remember walking in and sitting down, and he started rubbing my head. And I love head. And when I was a kid, a little kid, he called me Scooby, and I'd lay in bed with him and we'd watch Scooby-Doo and he'd rub my head. And I would take his hand and put it back on my head all the time, because I like a dog, put their head under your hand, hey, keep doing that. And so I'm going to my doctoral program at Florida State. I stop in to see him, which was the last time I got to see him. And when I sat down next to him on the floor, and he just started rubbing my head. And we're watching Jacques Cousteau. And my dad said, if I had to do it all over again, I would have been a marine biologist. And my dad was a good dad. He was wonderful. My dad cussed a lot, drank a lot, smoked a lot. He was a rough and rugged dad. But he was my dad, and he was a good dad. And he died living his second best alternative. And I think about people who are passionate about what they know, have something to offer the world. And I think it's a lot of people that don't share it for different reasons. Sometimes it's imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's just, I just don't believe I can't. It's hard to, I watch people really struggle with putting what they know down on paper. And sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's self-management. Some people just can't get out of their own way. They can't manage their time. Not that they can't. But at the moment they can't, it seems like, right? The time's not managed well. Rituals aren't put in place. Schedules aren't put in place. Blocking time, good practices for writing. Some people have something to share, but they just can't write. Maybe they never learned. When I graduated from high school, I don't think I could write. I don't think until I got through with my master's into my doctoral program that I finally was learning how to write like a proper sentence. Even now, I think I don't write grammatically the best, but some people just don't have the skill sets for technically doing the writing and so forth. And that's a struggle. There's a lot of different reasons not to, but there are people who have a story, they have something they want to share, and they make that decision. And they work through all of those things and build eventually a skill set to be able to be an effective thought leader. And then as a result, what happens next is they begin to see people coming to them to help them with the thing that person's writing about. And now all of a sudden, because I wrote it down and I shared it, or I presented it and I put it out there as a video, whatever it might be. Simon Sinek started with a TED Talk. He didn't write first. He did a TED Talk first. Right? But he put his idea out there and it got scalable. Now people are going to Simon and saying, hey, tell us about purpose. And what's he talking about? Purpose. What's he love? Purpose. What's he passionate about? Purpose. What's he enjoying? purpose. So now that scalable knowledge has caused people to call him and ask him to come help them. So he's now getting surrounded by people that are like-minded or that have a similar need. It's like a calling card, if you will, like good advertising, but it's thoughtful advertising. So, and then he gets more of an opportunity, because this is where I think the last thing I'll say, and I'm curious what you all think. The last thing is that as the idea gets out there, you get more opportunities to help people. And you also are seen, when you're a thought leader with evidence behind you, getting back to those 3 forms of evidence, you also are seen as credible, and people are willing to pay you, barter with you, if you will, but somehow provide you with a job, a project, an opportunity to make money, and or to create a living, or to professionally do what you love, and to be supported in that. I think a lot of people are thought leaders that don't practice the basic skills of successful thought leadership, and struggle every day to be known for what they do, because they're just not practicing some of the basics around that. I have 7 competencies that I've kind of built around that. I won't get into it right now, but I think it's the competency-based approach to that. So what are your thoughts? I mean, does that resonate with you? I know I threw a lot out there.
It's sort of like a wizard.
Angie was going to say something.
Oh, go ahead, Angie.
I just turning my camera on. So I am a consultant primarily in the nonprofit space, and I think about what you said, Dr. Cady, and my nonprofit clients are serving others. They're active thought leaders, and one of my big things with them is, if you want your work to go farther, people have to know more about it and this idea. And I've been promoting, not necessarily, I guess, thought leadership, but very much there are platforms. So I'm sure Lisa knows, since she's from Ypsilanti, the Detroit Economic Club, one of the best places you can be a speaker in Metro Detroit. Trying to get them basically PR, but get the chance to get their message out to people beyond their followers, their already existing audiences. And so that was a big reason I came today, that the idea of, I need to get these clients to that point and help them realize that they can, that they have something to share, and that their perspective is different, and that their organization becomes stronger when they share their ideas.
Yeah. And I think if you're doing more and more of what you love, and you're making a living in some way, reasonable living, doing what you love, that's what I call professional joy. That's kind of like, it's not like all day, every day, you're professional joy, but you can have more and more moments of joy in doing what you love, because you pause and go, I'm doing what I love, and I'm making money. I'm making a living. I'm able to do this. This is like the vocation, avocation kind of concept. In the chat, I'll put a link to an article that just got accepted. It's coming out in the next few months, I think. It's on professional joy. I put the link into the manuscript. But in there, I share a study from LinkedIn. I thought you all might find this interesting. It's a 2021 study, showed the percentages of decision makers who reported that the following actions occurred sometimes or more frequently after engaging with a piece of thought leadership. 42% showed an interest in the organization by inviting them to bid on a project, even if the organization was not initially among their options. 53% made the decision to increase their business dealings with the organization. 48% directed their business to the organization responsible for producing the thought leadership. 54% made a purchase of a new product or service from the organization that they hadn't considered purchasing before. So that kind of gets at the next level. Yeah, I'm passionate. Now I'm creating content, and it's making a difference. And now I'm getting more and more opportunities to make a difference in ways that I can actually take care of myself. I think thought leaders sometimes love it so much they're willing to give it away. And I think that's a tough one, because you love what you're doing and you want to make a difference. David's here, and I love seeing David. David, are you doing email, or are you listening, or doing a little bit of both? Are you able to weigh in on what you're hearing?
I'm very much listening, believe me.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear more. I just can't. The way you have your camera, it has your side of you looking off. So yeah, there,
Oh,
right.
yes.
So I just didn't
That's the
know.
good side.
Yeah, yeah, that's the nice side of your face. Yes, for sure. Well, I'm just, because we've all been kind of weighing in. Lisa's voice is a little out. Angie, I'm so glad to see you and have you weigh in. And To, I would love for you to weigh in as well. But David, what are some of your thoughts? What are you hearing and your reactions to what you're
I'm
hearing?
hearing a lot that relates to what I'm doing now. I'm out campaigning, talking to people I've never talked to before, realizing that I'm influencing them in a way that I've never done with people before. It's very interesting, and it's turning out to be beneficial for us both.
How do you tell us a little bit more about that? Talking to people you've never talked to before. What is the impetus for doing that?
The impetus is I'm running for city council in our tiny little town of Bowling Green. And so a big part of being a representative is understanding what people think of the city, what needs to change, what's good, what's bad. So I ask them about that, and they tell me. It's amazing.
Well, congratulations. I hope it goes all the way through. But I think that's a great example of what people on the grassroots, that's what we used to call the grassroots, do every day in order to achieve leadership, formal or informal. A lot of listening, a lot of synthesizing, and eventually what you get to do is to put something into policy, create law. And, for us, policy equals a book, policy equals other tangible ways that, as Steve has said, that it can be scaled and shared once it's out there. And until it's a policy or a law or both, it's discussion. But the great result that you will have is a better Bowling Green. You feel very proud of that in 5 years.
Yeah, and David, what I'll share with you is an interesting story about this, kind of an indirect way of emphasizing different ways to thought leadership is instantiated in the world. So Mike Bell was running for office in Toledo. He was running as an independent, and he was running against the Democrats and the Republicans, which are both pretty powerful machines, and the Democratic Party is very powerful in Toledo. And he was running as an independent. He was well known and well respected in the community. One of the things we did that nobody else did, that shook everybody to the core, is we did a collaborative process by engaging people from different perspectives, business leaders, community members. We went into communities, we engaged them all around a platform and a set of priorities and a set of needs and a set of problems, and got people to come to agreement on, what's going on in the community, in the city of Toledo, what matters to them, what's working and not working so well, and really got into some very clear point, what needs to be done and what's important and how important are these things that need to be done. And we turned it into just a two-sided one pager. It was different than a typical platform thing. It had a different feel to it because it was connected into the community's perspectives, but it was written in a way that was on a one pager. And we printed thousands and thousands of copies, and people went door to door and started passing them out. Everybody kept asking them, where is your thing? And it was always platitudes and kind of high level, but he put it into a framework that was a two-sided one pager that just shook everybody up. And he won the election, mind you, doing that. So there's this notion of the scalable written word. And in this case, in your case, listening to the people like the sushi chef, and then doing more listening and asking questions, pulling it into some concise document that can easily be shared and handed from person to person, shared digitally or in person. That's, I think, kind of one thing. T.O., are you willing to chime in? I'm curious if you're willing or able to. You don't have to have your screen on, but your camera. Or in the chat. I don't know if you're in the chat as well. Okay, so we're getting close to the end. I'd like to wrap up, and Lisa, I know your voice isn't, we can put it in the chat, but I'd love to just check out. Based on today and our conversation, what's one thing that you might do differently from here? And I'd love to just go around if someone could go and then maybe pick somebody else to go. And let's just check out what's one thing you might do differently. Is there anything that you might do differently or maybe pay attention to more from here? From what we talked about.
Well, I'm learning the hard way that to get the thought reader or the thought anyone who's going to consider my thoughts, you have to get them in a glance. You can have a lot of depth behind it, but and I know it sounds like a circus actor, just a quick glance, but a few key thoughts at a glance on LinkedIn or anywhere else, even in a conversation. If you don't if you don't get them in the first three sentences, it's a little too late. Now that's different than our slow, careful, methodical development of ideas, and even in conversations, take your time. But what I'm learning is, because of the way people are flipping through social media and so forth, their brains simply will not allow them to take the time to go with you on a deeper thought.
You gotta pull them in some way through the front door. The
Yeah.
door is small. The door is small, but you gotta do something on that front door to make them want to come inside.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah.
Quick and we used to say quick and dirty, but I say just quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Dave, invite someone else to share their.
Yeah, Angie.
I guess to build on that, the idea that that nonprofits have the opportunity to be thought leaders and to get them to go out the door instead of trying to get people to come in the door and read with little thoughts. You know, a lot of them just are so action oriented and changing the world, and they don't necessarily think about, and it's a major problem for one of my clients, articulating what they do. They just want to do. But you cannot serve all that you need to serve if you're not sharing what it is you're doing.
And what you've learned doing it. Yeah.
Right. And build support.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump on that and say that that's a really wonderful way of thinking about what I was about to say, Angie, that I think your framing is much better. I think, to me, using that front door analogy, the challenge has been that, hey, if people aren't showing up, maybe I need to be the one stepping outside and not live in my imposter syndrome, but say, hey, I'm going to go out there and tell people what my thing is, and then we'll see where that goes, and I'll have to deal with it from there, rather than sitting here on the inside and bemoaning the fact that nobody's knocking on my front door.
Exactly.
Why am I not pretty enough? Like, well, get myself out there and see who I can invite in.
Who you gonna pick?
Heyo, nice to see you, sir. I like this front door. I love to kind of riff on that, but I'll answer what Dr. Cady invited us to do, is what your takeaway, because just in terms of the door, Angie, it's changing maybe the approach. And when I work with these high tech salespeople, and they think I'm going to come in and tell them how I'm undefeated and I've closed $1 million deal every time I picked up the phone, but rather start with the story of what really qualifies me to be there, the fact that I failed, a lot, and show me someone who's successful. And I don't know who said that, Steve. I'm trying to think. I heard it probably somewhere over the years. What is showing someone who's successful, and I'll show you someone who's learned from their mistakes. Does anyone
who's failed a whole lot before?
Yeah. Right. But I like I think, Steve, what you're bringing with the belief and the skill. I had lots of things I really enjoyed this time. Thought performers. Dave, you said thought havers, thought followership. That was really rich. I'm just thinking the notion of thinking and where our thoughts are and what my thoughts are now as I receive them throughout today. I'm going to sort of just be with them. And is this something I want to have or execute, or just note and leave? Just be more present to those thoughts.
Great conclusion.
Yeah. Carol, how about you?
I'm going to build on you. I have many, many streams of thought that have come out of here. But I think the one thing that was really concrete was the idea of sitting down and really thinking about the one pager. To be that concise is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I'll call, Lisa's not speaking. David. David Drain.
I was hoping there was another David somewhere.
There is.
There was, that's
Now
why I
it's
had to say
Drain.
your last name.
But he
I go
spoke
by
already.
Yes, I did. And the one pager is very apropos to what I've had to do. The League of Women Voters sent me questions and gave me, I think it was 256 characters to tell how I'm going to come up with an energy program for the city of Bowling Green. So yeah, I've had to do that. It's very enlightening when you have to do that.
Yeah. 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 I don't think Tio's participating. Have we got everyone now? Steve, do you have any takeaways?
Yeah, I'm just like inspired. I'm trying to put in there something for David on this future Toledo stuff, the one pager in the chat, because I have it. I'm just trying to find that original one pager for him. Let me see. I think it's here. It is right here. Maybe this will be it. Yep, here it is. I found it, David. So I'll put that one pager in there for you. And you can see a strategic plan that came out after he got elected. We worked on a strategic plan. You'll see that there, but there's the one pager. Hopefully, see if that opened up for you. But you can it wasn't two-sided. It was actually one-sided. But you can see how we kind of boiled it down through a lot of engagement. Where are we? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? And that seemed to shake things up big time by just putting it in words and putting people's words on it. Because this wasn't his words. These are a gathering together of all the words of people he worked with. So I think a lot of times thought leadership is about really listening and figuring out how to position what we know with the people that we're trying to reach. And I think that's my takeaway is that, and I love my other takeaway is thought reader. Thought readership versus thought leadership. It's not versus, but thought leadership and thought readership, kind of like a Venn diagram. And the two shall meet through an interconnected experience, So with that, I think we're done for today. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, Lisa, for your help.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
Dale, it's good to see you. I can hang on after we're done and say hi if you want. I'm really grateful for everybody here. This was a lot of fun, and I'll see you all again in the next session or in the future very soon. So bye for now.
Nice to meet you, Angie.
Bye, all. Have a great day.
Bye, Dan. Bye, David.
And Steve, if you do.
Yeah.
Love to say hi.
Turn it off, Teo.